today, the intention is by the end of today that we should become clear as to what are the 5 disciplines, why these 5 disciplines, and how was it possible that Peter and his team decided to bring these 5 disciplines as a way of saying, if you want to become a learning organization, that when you have these 5 disciplines, be a part of not just your practice or talk about it, that it's an internalized process. And when that happens, it allows us then to be able to practice ourselves as a learning organization. Today, this is where we're going. In the subsequent sessions, we should be getting around into usually my process is I do work with systems thinking as a discipline. And then we get into mental models. That's around here, around session 7. And then into personal mastery and shared vision, which will be towards sessions 9 and 10. All right, so that's sort of the general progress of this work. There are, and I'm just putting it out there for now, about 60 tools. I think through these sessions, I may have picked about 10 to 12 of them. Now, 10 to 12 would give you a fairly good understanding to say, yes, I want to do this work and I want to go deeper with it, but often not enough for you to do the practice itself unless you do more readings or perhaps consider a deeper program. Okay, a deeper program in instances where countries or companies engage with me can sometimes go up to a year. All right, and in that process, they find as they go through that process for a year, at the end of the year, and usually at the end of the process, they're usually surprised at how much they're able to see that they couldn't see at the beginning. All right, so it's a process where there is a lot more internalization that goes on. So this is just to give you an outline of what this work is. I want to also share with you a brief that it's a brand new work that I just built in actually yesterday. It's been something I've been thinking about, Luca and Peter, although you've seen a lot of my pieces. This is a new piece of work. It was my way of trying to present how does the 5 disciplines work? What is their role as vis-a-vis with each other? And I really like this metaphor of, have you all heard of this metaphor saying, I can't see the forest for the trees? Is that something you're familiar with here? All right. What does the process look like? Sometimes we're not even aware. We think we're seeing a lot, but really we're looking at the bark of a tree. And sometimes we're holding on to it and hugging that tree. And yet we see a lot of details. Sometimes we're trying to make sense of what's going on in the bark of the tree. And in that process, because we're holding on to the tree or hugging that tree, when somebody is holding on to a different tree, we'll say, but this is what I'm seeing. And because I'm holding on to mine, I said, well, that's not possible because I don't see it. Here's what I see. And what each party doesn't realize is each is holding on to a different tree. The purpose of the 5 disciplines is in many ways learning to recognize that I am holding on to a tree. How would I let go of that tree so that I now begin, because I won't be able to see somebody else's tree as long as I hold on to mine. So what would I need to do in order to see somebody else's tree? I would need to learn how to let go of the tree that I'm holding on to so that I can see somebody else's tree. The discipline of mental models is intended for that purpose, to recognize I'm holding on to a tree. That's the purpose of mental models. And usually in practicing that discipline of mental models, I also become aware of my self-fears. Do you know what self-fears mean? These are emotions that we hold on to, perhaps from past experiences. Usually they are in our mindsets, or what we call mental models. And we're not aware that such a fear exists for us. There are a few types of fears that we talk to: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of death. And a lot of mental models are most powerful when we least know that they are there, because they are protected by these fears. So I'll talk to it as we go along, but the discipline of mental models is intended to become aware of our fears, recognize what is the mental model we are holding on to, and recognize how we're holding on to our tree. So as more of us practice mental models, we recognize the tree that we're holding on to. They're willing to let it go, because now we're no longer bound by our fears, that we are then able to step back. So that's the second picture. In the stepping back process, we now become capable of the next discipline. And what would that be? So if you look at the table, for mental models, the next discipline is learning. Now, if I'm holding on to my tree, would I be willing to learn about somebody else's tree? No, because I'm holding on to it. Does that make sense? Okay. But then as I let go of it, it becomes easier for me to be able to see somebody else's tree and learn about it as well. That's the process of team learning. Usually at this stage, the discipline of personal mastery also becomes easier. I don't want to say too much about it, but in that table, that's where I would place personal mastery. It also becomes easier for me to practice that. So what have we covered so far? Mental models, team learning, personal mastery. Then we're talking about system thinking. System thinking comes in a little later. It is a useful tool to recognize there is a forest. It's a useful tool to recognize why I need to let go of my tree. But it won't be easy to see these archetypes until I exercise those other disciplines first: mental models, team learning, and personal mastery, which makes it then easier for me to practice systems thinking. And then where does shared vision come in? Shared vision comes in towards the last. So I'm not able to, can I be able to move this? Yes, I should be able to move this. All right. That's where the discipline of shared vision comes in. It comes in last. Now, can all of you, this has been shared on the group. Peter, if you could help Lisa also share this. I don't know if she's on the group. I just need to let somebody go. We had somebody working in my yard today. I'm just going to let them out of the yard, and then I'll come back. I just need a few minutes to do that. So meanwhile, would you all open up this on the WhatsApp, all of you, and just give me 2 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, Luca. Tuan and Farm, are you still doing the non-profit work? Non-profit organization?
Well, actually, I'm still involved in the NGO. We have the team in Vietnam, but it's more like a network of friends. But that is under the big umbrella of International Initiative Change. So they're running different kinds of programs on leadership development, trust building, reconciliation, that kinds of thing. Yeah. So we are having different programs like international conference. We have like in India and also in Switzerland. Like for this summer, we are going to have one international conference in Cologne, Switzerland, talking about the trust building. I mean, trust building is a main topic. Yeah. So yeah, for me personally, it's more like a network of friends rather than an organization. Yeah, but for some other countries, they quite very structured in their work and quite very mature. Mm.
So in Vietnam side, the organization is the group of you coming together. It's not organized like some international organization or funded by anything.
Yeah. In Vietnam, it's more like a group of friends,
Oh.
rather than organization. Yeah.
And
But
most of
like,
the work,
yes.
most of the work, what y'all do there?
I'm sorry.
What do y'all do most of the work?
Actually, for Vietnam, it's more like the communities. We come together and share our personal things, and we take the practice of inner listening as a practice, and also the idea of personal change. Recently, last December, we are doing a program that we call Mekong Youth Exchange Program. So basically, actually that programs evolved from what Sheila shared from the beginning about the Cambodian Vietnam things, and now it's evolved to be Mekong Exchange Program. So we have so basically we bring young people and young professionals from countries um, uh, like Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia as well. And also last time we also had one person from Tibet. Um, so it's more like the conversation, community building, friendship. And we're also talking about the differences. So basically, the issue we are facing is that even we live together in this region, but we really don't understand each other's what is happening there, what is the struggle there, and because we don't see each other's, so that's how when something happens, it's very easy to trigger misunderstanding and anger and that kinds of thing. Like for example, the situation in Myanmar and Thailand, even Cambodian. Yeah, so that's the idea of the program. Mm. Yeah.
All right.
Can I,
Yeah.
can I give an example that happened in Italy? In Italy, we had a part of Italy that speak German and people living in the mountains, very tough people, very hardworking people. And during the past period, I mean, until 20 years ago, we had a conscription. And so the military service permitted to the young people from German-speaking people, together with Italian people, to know each other. Now the problem is coming back, a problem of hating among the two different groups because the people doesn't know each other.
I see. Yes, actually, there was a very nice story a long times ago. I mean, talking about one French ladies who forgive the Germans for what they did with her family, like killing that kinds of thing. So, so the focus was again how we can bridge people together and bring them to have the honest conversation, and then from that, the reconciliation and trust building can happen between. Yeah, so hopefully one day we have more space and we can talk more about this. I think it's very helpful. I think especially I really acknowledge what Sheila did for us last time. Even up to now, we still use a lot of data and story around that to share until today. Yeah, there's a lot of understanding about letter reference and then also the mental models, that kinds of thing. And when we come to understand, that's how the healing process happen as well.
That's true. There is, is more. Well, it's such a vicious nature of these hurts that happen because somebody carries that hurt, not knowing he or she may be doing that, and unintentionally keep causing hurt around him or her or to the next generation, and that continues to the next generation as well. So this process of saying I forgive or I accept is a necessary part, but it's not an easy process. So tools like some of these tools can help to some extent, especially in understanding, and that understanding usually helps the process of healing. So in as much as these tools may be applied on a large scale, on a very personal scale, they have also lots of applications. So usually within an organizational setting, I pay more attention to the first three disciplines: mentor model, team learning, personal mastery. Systems thinking, I talk about it, although the application may be somewhat limited, not entirely, but there is some limitation. But we do encourage companies also be part of groups of companies, because that's when the application of systems thinking, shared vision becomes more easier to practice. But it usually helps when more people understand this, so that that direction becomes possible. Now, I wanted to take us back to, the question, why did Peter and his team come up with these 5 disciplines? And why not something else? Because part of me is also saying, I mean, yes, I can accept lock, stock, and barrel just because Peter said it, or because the book published it that way. I should accept it. But if we don't understand the same way Peter Senge had defined these 5 disciplines, we don't understand why he's more excited than all of us about the use of the 5 disciplines. And, we said, well, it's him, and, it's okay for him to be excited. I just don't see what's the excitement all about. So usually when I talk to the 5 disciplines, I actually like to start there. Why these 5 disciplines? Why not something else? Having said so, the work of these 5 disciplines, one of Peter's gifts was really in bringing different streams of work and putting them together. So mentor models came from a stream of work by Chris Argyris. Now, of course, at a later stage, we will talk to him as well. Chris Argyris contributed significantly. He's passed on. He's no longer with us. Contributed significantly to that particular discipline, along with team learning. And his specific contribution was in the area of defensive conversation. So when we get to those modules later on, we will talk to them. So this is what Peter did. He took those streams of work. A lot of work by William Isaac on dialogue was also integrated in the work on team learning. Personal mastery comes from the work by Robert Fritz on the creative tension model. Personal mastery comes from Robert Fritz, from his work on the creative tension model. And Robert Fritz was recently, just this past week, on Seoul Global Forums, where he talked about his work, and particularly around how do I clarify my future? How do I create a reality that is not in front of me? And that's what a lot of artists do. Artists create things, not from the present reality, right? And yet, when it is created, it was a future for the artist, but it has become real for us today. And so he describes that process, and Peter Senge basically brought in that work, and he's termed it as personal mastery. Systems thinking, well, Jay Forrester, his mentor, had a big role in his influence on systems thinking. But I personally feel that he, along with the likes of Michael Goodman, made it easier for us, so that without having to map the system every time, has identified about 10 to 11 archetypes or templates, or what we call patterns, that explains most kinds of dynamic complexities. So there he developed a piece of work there, but it is rooted in Jay Forrester's work on systems dynamics. And there's a lot of practice out there on systems mapping. But I'll explain the distinctions at some point, but they're not the same. But this is where Peter did his contribution by identifying 10 system archetypes that explain most kinds of dynamic complexities as we know today. Shared vision. Shared vision, I've not heard anyone else talk about it except Peter. And I think that's his personal contribution. And, for me to explain that a bit more, I would need to go through the next exercise. It's going to be an exercise. We're going to do it together. I have done it once or twice online like this. Of course, most of my experience is face-to-face, but I think we can pull it off. If you all want to grab a notebook and a pen at this point, it's a good time to do so. And I'm going to start the exercise shortly. All right, any questions for me at this point? Right, let's get into the exercise. And in order for me to set the context for the exercise, I'm going to start off with a story by a colleague of Peter Senge. He's based actually, Tom, in Netherlands. His name is Arie de Geus, A-R-I-E, Arie de Geus. And he wrote a book called The Living Organization. The Living Organization. So it's not learning, but the living organization. And I felt the title was very apt because a lot of us treat organization as if it's an object that you use to get what you want. And for him to term the word living is to say organization is as alive as us, as a human. It has got its own birth, it's got its own journey, it's got its own experiences. And he talks to what that experience looks like, and he says, how do you bring about an organization and make it alive? Now, his own experience, and when he began to write that book, himself, he was a planner at Shell, again in Netherlands. He was based in the Netherlands. And Shell, am I right? Is it originating from Dutch? Yeah, okay,
yep,
from Netherlands.
That is.
Yes, and so
exactly, it's a Royal Shell Oil Netherlands, the name of the company.
Right. Exactly. So his experience and his young life was part of Shell organization. And obviously, at some point, Shell became curious about its own longevity. How long would it live? Because, I mean, it's seen a very thriving organization. It's seen other organizations also sprout out. And he became curious, how long would Shell survive? And in order for him to understand this better, he became curious about, and this was his question, what is the average lifespan of organizations? What is the average lifespan of organizations? So this was a study that he did whilst he was at Shell, not at the time when he wrote the book, but the experiences that he documented in the book came out of such an experience. And he was very instrumental also in a field of work called scenario planning. So he contributed significantly to that particular tool. And it came out of this particular question that he had. What was the average lifespan of an organization? Now, he did the research, and at that time, this would have been in the 80s, he came across a particular number as to what was the average lifespan of an organization. Now, some of you have done this exercise with me. Who has done this exercise with me? Do you recall this exercise? I'm sure you do, but you're not.
I forget. Actually, I forget. I remember the question asked before, and then suddenly forget.
Oh, that's good. At least we've got the question was asked before. That's very good. Considering what has been going on in our lives, I mean, considering people have got married, people have had children, new lives have been born since then. So this was the question Arie de Geus lived with. He says, what's the average lifespan? Because if we can figure out what's the average lifespan, then it would give us an indication how long would Shell live? And if Shell wants to live longer, what does that mean? All right, so he got into that journey and he did research. He looked at small companies, he looked at medium companies, he looked at large companies, he looked at companies that were just born in the past decade, previous decades, went back as far as he can. And as he did so, he came across and he was able to figure out what was the average lifespan of an organization. Before I do that, Lisa, have you come across Arie de Geus or such a question before?
I recalled, I heard this kind of conversation before, but I could not recall the exact one. I kind of think it's like 7 years or something. But I recall that I heard this kind of conversation about
Oh,
the
that's
average.
interesting.
Yeah. Maybe in my
That's
MBA
interesting.
class.
Wonderful. So here's what, but before I do that, let's just have a quick round of guess around the room. What do you think? All right, and maybe I have to ask two questions. In the 80s, what do you think was the average lifespan? Today, what do you think is the average lifespan? So I don't think it's the same question for both decades, because we're clearly on like what, 40 years on from the time he did the research. Anybody has any guesses? Now, probably Luca would remember this, but besides Luca, does anybody know what that number could be?
Yeah, in the past, yes. Today, I guess that the average is very short because the forest in terms of wild environment has grown in recent times. So the
Yes.
startup method is something that is very similar to Darwinistic way to see the nature. You grow a lot of individuals and you kill a lot of them before they are born.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
true.
guess that now it's maybe 3-4 years long, the average time for a company
Nice.
today.
So a lifespan would be the time it was birthed or incepted to the time it decides to close its doors. So that's what we're talking about. So here's what Aridicus found in the 80s. Now, the number is not significant. There is a story behind the number that I want to get to. What Aridicus discovered in the 80s was the average lifespan of an organization was about 40 years. Okay, that was the 80s.
One generation and a half.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it's almost like the lifetime of the founder. And the founder was there and he founded the organization till the time the founder was alive. That's how long the organization stayed. And if the founder is no longer around, then organizations find it harder to keep going. Now, that was not the important point. The important point was, as much as Aridicus found most organizations, 80-90% of organizations don't survive their 40th birthday, he came across but a very small percentage of organizations, probably around 3 to 5%, that not only survived their 40th birthday, but went on to survive 100 years, some 200 years, and some by as many as 700 years.
There is a bank in Italy that has been surviving for 600 years.
So here's your homework. Yes, I was going to do that. Here's your homework. All right. So please write it down and Tonan, put it on the chat so that, or in the group later on. I would like you all to go out and do research after today's session. Organizations that were 100 years, even today, 100 years or more. Who are they? What are their names? When were they incepted? What have they been doing? And what are they doing now? Organizations that are 100 years or more. Who are they? When were they incepted? All right. What did they start their business as? What are they doing currently? Okay. So generally do a sort of a history, are you limited to your country? No, you can search any part of the world. Okay. So come up with organizations 100 years old, 200 years old, 700 years old. Okay. And you will share it on the WhatsApp group. I'll do the same exercise with the other group as well, just to go to show to us that whilst in our experience, most organizations don't survive their 5th birthday, there are organizations that go way past that. And at that point, you begin to wonder, because founders perhaps are with their organizations for about 30, 40 years. Now, if an organization is 100 years old, let's just stay with 100, that would have long passed the age of the founder and perhaps subsequent successors. and still going strong. It's like as if the organization has a life of its own. It's as if the organization has a life of its own. That's why his book was called The Living Organization. And you know, usually at this point, I do an exercise just for us to experience. If an organization survived 200 years, what does that look like? So we're going to do that exercise. It may take us about 10 minutes or so. And in that exercise, I would like us to begin to think about what did it mean for the organization to be able to live for over 100 years past the lifetime of an organization. And the purpose of this is for us to learn for ourselves, how did these 5 disciplines come to be? So the concept of learning organization, as Peter has eventually defined it, the root of it, as I see it, comes really from Ari Dugu's work on the living organization. And as to how and what it makes for organizations to live and learn is where the 5 disciplines come as a practice. So we're going to go into that exercise. You can watch how that exercise is. I would love for each one of you, you know, whichever spaces you are, practice that exercise also with your teams, also with teams that you do your practices with, because it's a really beautiful, immersive process. And it makes people wonder, okay, how is that even possible? So we're going to start off with, here's how I do the exercise. We're going to start off with today, and we're going to go back in time. And as we do so, at a particular call or a particular time that I call out, we're going to describe what is that period about, and something that typifies or as you recall, perhaps from your personal experiences, what does that time talk to, or what did that resemble? So I'm going to start with today. Today is the year 2023. It's February. Now I know we are early in the year, so I'm going to allow you to also count 2022 or even 2020, 21, 22, 23, this period. And if you were to describe events that typify that, if somebody in the future was to say, what was 2023 for you like? How would you describe it? So off the cuff, I would say 2020, the world was hit by COVID and it went into a practical shutdown with lockdowns. So that's an event that typifies this period. So you get an idea where I'm going with this? All right. So you can recall, it could be something that happened in your life personally, perhaps in your family, perhaps in your somebody got married, somebody had this, somebody had that, or it was in your community or in your country or in your region. So we're going to take that exercise for a few minutes, and then we're going to go back in time doing the similar exercise. So we're going to start with this period. Anybody wants to share? What else would you say and describe this period looks and feels like? You had no idea when you got up this morning, you'll be asked to do this exercise. Yes. When was this young lady who from, where was she from? Was it the Netherlands? I can't remember. Was it Goethe? The one she from where?
Sweden, Greta.
Sweden. Yes, that's right. Yes. When she went and she apparently took the ship to the US to attend the climate change conference, just to show, well, you know, why climate change is real. And when was that?
I think it should be in 2018 or so.
In 2018? Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So the call for climate change issues, I mean, it's not new, but how much the call has also reached out to the young ones actively being a part of that process. So that's another event. What other events? Where was World Cup this year?
Qatar.
Ah, okay, at Qatar. Okay. All right. And was perhaps one of the first few ones that is happening in the Middle East?
You asked that question again?
Is it one of the first few World Cups happening in the Middle East?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I should think so. Yeah. Okay. What else? China is still dealing with COVID.
And I think for me, it's more also about like the way we communicate nowadays, right? We
Ah,
would really prioritize for the visual interaction like this rather than face to face, and
oh,
change a
yes,
lot in the companies, in school, in like the whole life as well.
that's true. The working from home process. Yes. Yeah. How many more are not in a physical space of the company, but working virtually and still moving the works. Yeah. And it's probably even in the 2000s. I mean, it's something probably we imagined we could do it, but we didn't want to do it because we didn't think it would work out. And yet COVID forced us into that situation and we're figuring our way around it. So trust humanity to figure it out. Anything else?
Yes. For me, one big change that was produced was inadvertently, maybe by the COVID lockdown. It was that the Italian population was split into halves that had no way to communicate each other, or with vaccine or against vaccine.
Oh,
And
wow.
that changed dramatically the relationship among the people. People that before were friends became hostile.
Wow. Who would have thought of that? Yes. That's amazing. Good. All right. Well, I'm sure you can think of others. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back in time. Okay. And so we were looking at, let's just to make it easy, we're looking at the year 2020. I'm going to push back 20 years back. So we're looking at the year 2000. Right? So we're back in time in the year 2000. And we're looking around us in that year and noticing what was happening in that year. In what ways was it similar or different from what you're experiencing today? Year 2000. What was happening in the year 2000? Was that the Y2K scare? The year Y2K? How many of you are familiar with that? The Y2K, where people were worried because the year wouldn't change and then all the data gets wiped out from the computers because, yep. Yep. So
I had
you
to
remember
produce,
that scare?
yes, I had to produce a software for an IBM 36 because of a millennium bug. And so I had
Oh,
to study a way to export all the data from our IBM 36. That for me was a very funny thing because
yes.
everything about the programs was lost. So I had
Yeah.
to rebuild everything by outside without having any knowledge about IBM 36. And I was
Jesus.
able to do
Wow.
it.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So that's the year 2000. Imagine today we talk about AI. Am I right? How about the year 2000? What would we have said to AI then?
I think it's only in the movies, sci-fi movies.
So you didn't think it was possible that one day it is going to be on our laptops. So yes, we imagined it's more in the movies, not in real life. What else? Year 2000. What was happening to you personally in your lives, in your communities, in your families, in your country?
But the problem that I see now is it's a Dunning-Kruger effect at higher level. I
Yes.
mean, people is relying on what they call science, but that is not science. It's just another kind of fight. and they are committing the future to those kind of technologies, bringing back their skills
Mhm.
from what is the intelligence, and everybody hope that the future will be ruled by a higher level, higher than humanity, a sort of another god with
Wow.
artificial intelligence. And that is the strong risk that we are
Yes.
facing, because a politician will how can I say, will um, assess those kind of things. And the people
Mm.
will accept because they think that that is a real intelligence, not human one.
Right. Right. So here's what we're going to suggest that you do. Since all of you are at the internet, it doesn't mean you have to do this just with your imagination. Get onto the internet and say, in the year 2000, what was happening? And then share out what you read on the internet as well. So, you have to do this on a face-to-face session, but whilst we're doing virtually, take advantage of that space. So the year 2000. What were some of the events that was happening? This is the benefit of a virtual session, isn't it?
I think for me, the two important event for myself is the first ISS crew that actually leave, like the first human crew that actually live in the ISS, the International Space Station.
Okay, wow.
Something like that. So it really opened my
Yes,
eyes, like, wow, we are already there, you know. And then in
yes,
how in Vietnam,
yeah, yeah. So it is possible to live outside the Earth. That's what you're basically saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet 20 years before that, that would have been science fiction then. Is that possible? Yet in 2000, we made that possible. Very nice. What
So
else?
Harry Potter. Harry Potter.
And what?
Sorry, to read Harry
Oh, Harry Potter. Was it in 2000? Oh my gosh. Oh, wow.
Another
Okay.
important happening around 2000, I start to enjoy a little bit later, is Wikipedia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right.
Wikipedia, it's a very important fact
Yes.
on our life.
Yes. And it wasn't there before 2000s?
So I just saw it. Its founding date is 2001. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. Amazing. What else?
Microsoft did a very reliable operating system.
Was the euro established in the year 2000 as a currency?
Yes, but it started to work around 2002 and became official currency in 2003.
Okay. And then I'm reading the crash of the Concorde. Oh my God, because it was such an icon in the 80s.
Yeah.
And then the year 2000, you have this experience of the Concorde crash. What else? PlayStation. PlayStation was released in the year 2000. That's interesting. Okay, now I'm sure we can pick up many other things, but let me stop here for now. Between 2000 and 2023 or 2020, is the world the same or they're quite different? Between 2020 and the year 2000, is the world the same or they are different?
For my opinion, I speak at the last one. I'm too old compared with others, so my experience is longer.
So Tam, for you, if you go back to the year 2000 and you look at yourself today, do you think they are the same?
Absolutely not. I never thought that I will settle in the Netherlands.
That's true.
Yeah, for me at that point, like the world is very new and very strange. I never been outside to the world, only in my tiny town in Vietnam. And now I'm everywhere. So I think it's really totally different. With the
Totally
AI,
different.
it's very easy
Yeah.
to travel anywhere as well. The freedom and everything, you know.
Mhm. That's true. That's true. So the others, do you feel the same way, or does anybody feel different between the year
Yes.
2000, the year 2020, 2023?
Yes, the strong difference is the pervasivity of information. And
That's true.
what was written by George Orwell in his book 1984 is
Yes.
becoming a reality.
Mhm.
But what is the dramatic part of the truth that Orwell said is that there is the agreement from the population. Because
Yes.
maybe formerly in communism, people did not agree so much, but now
Mhm.
the power has the agreement of the most of the population.
Mhm. Mhm. There you go.
Because
Yeah, so certainly there is a change, right? Certainly there is a change. Let's keep pushing a bit more. So you get an idea. So start searching. So we're going to push back another 20 years again. So we're going to bring ourselves back to the year 1980 now. So we were at 2000. Now we're putting ourselves back to 1980. Who wasn't born then? Anybody in this group who wasn't born? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, right, sure. So do your history research. 1980, what was happening in the year 1980? Did the world know computers at that point?
I think
1980,
so.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think
Huh?
so. It's starting. I think it's
What do you
starting
think,
like
Lisa?
late 70s something for the computer things.
no, it was
Well,
yes, mid the 70s. I bought my
yeah.
first computer in 85. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that's a difference. There was research on the computer happening, but the mass use of computer wouldn't have been till about the mid 80s. I know in Singapore, we became quite active in the police force. I was then working in the police force in Singapore. In late 80s, around 88, 89 is when we started getting our first computers. And can you imagine, there was, instead of writing on books or typewriters, here was this machine with lots of buttons and connected with electricity. I mean, that was a very strange experience for many of us in the late 80s, which means in 1980, for most of us, we weren't working with computers like the way we are today. So what were we doing then?
I also remember the internet is not yet invented around
Certainly
80
not,
years.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly not. So I'm just going to bring on 1980.
For me, I think it's very much like post-war period.
You think so?
And
Yeah, the
especially for
recovery
Vietnam,
from the post-war.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially for the Vietnam situations, we
Ah,
recover from the war, and at that time
yes.
we got the embargo from the international communities, and I think
Yes.
we are trying to reform the country, and it's about communist things between China and Russia and the West as well, and the way no
Yes.
now the reason this is important because it's impact how we behave as well, and like for example in Vietnam the government control everything in terms of product distribution,
Mhm.
yeah, quite very yeah,
Yes.
somehow it's also very like industrialized things, process
Yes.
structure,
Yes.
very factory things,
Yes.
and closed
Wow.
market.
So that was
I,
like a pivot, a change for Vietnam to what it is today. I mean, it wasn't then what it is today, but it was the pivoting point for Vietnam. That's amazing. I was
I
just
remember.
reading something, Post-it notes was being launched in the stores you know what Post-it notes are? I don't know
Yeah.
whether we still do. Yeah. These ones, these guys, that was in the 1980s. Can you imagine? I mean, today we use it so easily, but before 1980, nobody knew what a Post-it was. Can you imagine? John Lennon was shot to death. What
I
else was
remember-
going on?
I remember about the Vietnam. There was a joke in Italy
Yeah.
about how strong the worker worked in Vietnam, because someone said that if in Italy workers had to work like they do in Vietnam, where we go to buy our shirts and our many of our textiles, the worker will go in the strike immediately. And that was funny because Italy
so that's
was
a story between
strongly,
Italy and Vietnam. Oh my gosh.
yes, was strongly left, and in Vietnam there was a communism, but they acted
Oh,
as a industrial capitalism at that time.
Oh, that's
At least
amazing.
that was the
Vietnam,
joke.
did you know that? All right. How many of you know the Rubik cube? Do you know the Rubik cube where you sort of twist and turn and get the colors? That was when it was debuted in the 1980s. Can you imagine? All right. What else? Lisa, what was happening in Hong Kong in the 1980s?
I don't know. I wasn't born. And actually, I grew up in China. So what I found is the pay. So what you mentioned, the computer. My first learning of computer was 1994 in my school.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like we're lagging behind a little bit. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. All right. So let me just stop here. 1980, year 2000. Same, different, greater than, less than.
Yeah,
Are
very
they the same?
different. Very different.
Very different. Very different.
I think
Okay,
the
just-
world was connected in 2000, and it
Yeah.
was divided around 80s, that kind of thing.
So just for the interest of time, I'm going to push back 50 years. 1980, go back 50. Which year are we looking at?
30.
1980, go back 50 years. Which year are we looking at? 1930s.
Oh,
Of course, none of us were born then, so we really have to dig our history here.
yes,
All
my
right.
father did.
1930s, that would have been, we're coming out of World War I and we're getting into World War II. Yes. Machines were being discovered. Weapons were being discovered, were being invented. Yes. What else?
There was I don't remember the term in the huge balloon that were navigating
Yeah.
the ocean.
There was,
Nazis was on the pace to become the strongest power in Germany.
that's true. The Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam was
Over there.
making problems. I think you're talking about this one, the Hindenburg. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Japan invades China. Well, we were in between wars then, weren't we? Yes. So the world as we know it then was going through a Great Depression. Yes. All right.
Probably also the colonizations, in many countries.
Yes.
from the west,
Colonies
from
were
Europe
still
to
very
Asia.
prominent in their
And
countries,
then,
exactly.
What?
So
Sorry?
who was in Vietnam at that time? 1930?
French.
French.
It's
Yes.
a French colonialism.
Yes. And it would be British for Singapore. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the 30s, there was another important phenomenon: studies on nuclear power, mostly in Italy, Germany, and USA.
Right. Okay. 1930, 1980. Very different, yeah? You're okay with that? All right. One more pit stop. This time, we're going to push back 100 years. So which year are we looking at?
1830. 1830.
1830. All right, let's see whether we can pick up anything. Are you picking up anything on the internet? 18, oh, wait, there is no history.
You
What are
wrote,
you guys picking
you
up?
wrote a 10,000.
Wonder.
That's the future.
Thank you. Yes, 1830. What's going on?
They say
Oh.
the revolution in France, Belgium, Poland, Switzerland, Italy.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Just because
Wow.
after Napoleon wars, there was a
Yes.
sort of re-establishment of ancient powers. But now
Mhm.
the population felt a sort of feeling of democracy. And so they
Yes.
refused to remain under what was a sort of feudal power. And so many revolts, many wars against what was the former style of power rose. And there were
Okay.
many nationalisms in
Mhm.
Italy. That was the meaning for that. And,
Yes.
in
Were
France
the
too.
planes invented then? 1830? Did we have airplanes?
The plane or 70s, I guess.
Well, the airplane was actually at the turn of the last century, the year 1905.
Yeah.
So which means in 1830, if we had to travel anywhere, how did we do that? I mean, Tom, if you had to go to Netherlands, what would you have to do?
I
By
think they take a
horses.
ship for months.
No, there was railroads. There were small railroads all around because they were built in 18th century. But
18th
I
century.
guess
So
they were
But I think in
mostly
Asia,
local.
I think in Asia is that time we don't really have developed like railways
as
network. So I think most of the time should be ships.
by ships. So which means today,
Yes,
how long
but
does it take? Yes,
I
today, how
mean,
long does it take for you to travel to Netherlands from Vietnam?
I think months.
No, I
Because
mean
at
on the
least-
airplane. On the
Yeah.
airplane? On the
Airplane
airplane?
about 12 hours, 12, 13 hours.
12 hours. No, so we're talking about that difference, yeah? Okay, I want to just pause here for now. What was the purpose of this exercise? You notice obviously 1830 is very different from 1930, and how different it was from 1980, the year 2000, the year 2023, as we know today. Now, what was the purpose of this exercise? Here's what Ari Gus found. He says, while 80-90% of our organizations did not survive their 40th birthday, probably today it's much less, he came across organizations that were born in 1830, lived through 1930, kept going through 1950, 1980, year 2000, and is still going on strong today. All right? Most of them didn't do it, but it didn't mean none of them did it. There were organizations who did that. And he became curious. What is it about those organizations that survived hundreds of years, was able to do? What allowed them to do that? That organizations today are not able to do it, and therefore do not see themselves live beyond their 5th birthday, much less the 40th birthday. What was different? What made it different for those organizations?
I cannot speak for other organizations, but for most, the company I work for is almost 120 years old. What I observe in them, they have the fixed core values over the 110 and 20 years. They don't change it at all. And then the owner.
So I'd like you all to do a research, as part of your homework. Check what happened for them. So first discover which are these organizations and what did it mean for them to be able to survive hundreds of years. So you will do this as part of the exercise. Then again, here's a few questions I want to ask you. For organizations that survived hundreds of years, will they have survived if they looked at the world through the same lens. Do you know what I mean by the same lens? Meaning, the way I look at the world today, would that lens still work for me had I been in 1830? It's a question for us to think about. The way we had to look at the world in 1830 is not the way we look at the world today in 2020. Did they had to learn how to change their lenses? Do you know what I mean by change their lenses? Like today I wear this lens, but for tomorrow when I want to look at the world, if this lens doesn't help me understand that world, I need to know how to be able to change them. The ways I look at the world would have to change with the way the world also changes. What else? Did they have to learn to be flexible? Do you know what I mean by flexible?
There are a couple of companies. There are some companies that, for my opinion, didn't change their attitude in the past 150 years, and most of them are chemicals. Because if I think about German chemicals companies like BASF or Hoechst or other companies, they survived to more than two economical disasters, because they survived to the First World War, they survived to the Second World War, and they are still polluting, they are still producing dangerous chemicals, and they produce, for instance, the toxic gases that were used in the First World War.
That's true.
And,
That's true. That's true. Yes.
And
the way they go about doing it, as much as what perhaps from one perspective, it's not well, you use the word polluting, but the way they go about doing it, is it still the same process? Meaning in the 1830s, they wouldn't have used AI to do it. They wouldn't have used computers to do that. Yes, they probably even wouldn't have used typewriters to do it. And yet over the years, they have learned to adapt different technologies, maybe to serve the same purpose, but they had to learn how to adapt different technologies to serve that purpose.
It can be interesting also what is the part that they kept, they permit them to survive for so long, because for instance, to be the service to the government is an important part.
Yes.
Remain.
All right, let's look at a few other things. What else did these organizations have to do? Not just about in terms of their mandate or what they were out to do. If they kept their eyes in the past and lose sight of the future, is it easy to live in the future? Can I repeat that question again? My experiences come from my past. Yes? So where does my attention go to? My attention stays in the past, right? Organizations that survive hundreds of years, did they only pay attention to the past, or they also had to keep an eye on the future?
The market changed, and so they had to change.
They had to change. Sometimes they may be led by others, but sometimes they also had to be leaders of the change. They may be creating that future. Okay, often those who create the future are better able to survive the future than others who are led into it themselves. So they had to keep an eye on the future. They had to learn how to be able to change the way they look at the world. Okay, what else?
I will add on.
Did they have to? Yes.
Yeah, Sheila.
Keep going.
So in order to see the future while operating in current, what I think is challenging is the leadership transition conversation.
That's true.
Because over so many years, right, there will be so many generations of things. So how do you keep consistent? I think the most challenging part is keeping that consistent view.
Yes.
Or the other way around, sorry, not consistent view. The ability to keep having a consistent way of conversation, to see different things.
To see different things. That's interesting. And to be able to know how to have those conversations. Was it important for them to be Was it important for them to be able to see a view that is different from theirs?
Yeah, definitely. So Shell is one good example, right? When Shell
Yes.
developed their scenario planning, they
Mhm.
realized that, no, sorry, before they built a scenario planning, they couldn't
Mhm.
convince their executive that Shell can be a company without producing oil, right?
Yeah.
To get them to see that that's because they see things differently, they have to see things in scenario. That's why Shell is the
Yeah.
first company to do the scenario planning.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
conversation. So the lesson is not about how they develop the scenario planning. The lesson learned is
Mhm.
how they manage to convince the current executive to take on scenario planning. I think that's more
That's
valuable.
That's true. That's true.
There is a lot of
And
mental
it is a
model.
way of it's a way of presenting what if there was an alternative, what could be the alternative,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yes.
So Shell has a history of seeing tomorrow while doing today, but yet they still get caught, right? So it's not about just
Yes.
seeing tomorrow. It's about the ability to have that conversation
Yes.
consistently.
Yes. Now we may see Indonesia and India joining us, so it'd be a nice way to sort of meet each other whilst we are. This is where the 5 disciplines came to be, and this is what made it easier for Peter and his team to define what the 5 disciplines are. So I'm going to go to my blog. So just give me a second. And so that's the book that Peter eventually published in 1990. So you can add that to your number of years. This is the piece that we've been looking at. It's also up on my blog. And this is one way that Peter summarizes the 5 disciplines. Organizations that were able to survive hundreds of years had 3 major capacities: the ability to understand complexity, the ability to generate conversations that allows them to see a view beyond what one can see, to learn what others are also seeing, as well as an ability to keep an eye on the future as much as I am busy with my present or dealing with my past. And organizations that had these 3 capabilities generally survived their hundreds of years better than organizations that did not do so. And what you see with the 5 disciplines, where system thinking comes in, where mental model team learning comes in, where personal mastery shared vision comes in, they feed into each of those 3 capabilities. Personal mastery and shared vision clarifies our aspirations, both at a personal as well as shared. Mental models and team learning are disciplines intended to help us have conversations when they become generative, allows us to flex our views and be able to incorporate a view that is different from mine. Therefore, we are learning. And then as a result of that, be better able to make sense of the challenges and the problems and the complexities that we face, not just at a personal level, but also at a wider level, and sometimes at a large scale or national spaces. That's where these 5 disciplines come in. What Peter did then was, in talking through these 3 legs, as we call it, he then pulled together a set of tools. And he would say the practice of the learning organization is in the practice of these tools. And so when I share the work of the 5 disciplines, I essentially share what each of these tools are. And in understanding those tools, we understand what the practice of learning organization looks like. Most of the time when I do work with the teams, I start work with system thinking, and then I move towards mental models and team learning, and then eventually we move to personal mastery and shared vision. Now, all of this information has been posted on the WhatsApp group that we are on. I would suggest take your time to go through them. They're hyperlinked. This is also my blog. Is my blog on the WhatsApp, Tuanan? Is the link to the
recent?
I
think I
put
Can I
in the
resend it?
description of the group. So if you go to the 5 discipline practice, click on there, you see the link. I put in the description.
Okay. You put it under the description of the group. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I've just copied that link as well. Let me see if Indonesia has joined us. Is anybody here from Indonesia? Not yet. Indonesia and India? Not yet.
When you are,
You could either, sorry?
no, go ahead. Tuan was trying to speaking, but he was mute.
Okay. Fanan, you wanted to say something?
No, just respond to your question. And yeah,
Okay.
I
I see Huda is online. Okay, Huda is online. So you get a chance to meet also the other team who's going to go through a similar program as well in the next hour and a half. Any questions on what the 5 disciplines is about, or why those 3 aspirations, why those 3 legs? Why do you think Peter represented them as a 3-legged stool? Why do you think he represented these 3 capabilities of organizations that learn and live as a stool?
Why three legs to?
Yes, why 3 legs? Well, yes.
I guess it's
What-
about sustainability is because it's hold the stool on the organization itself to be stable and to sustain.
Mhm. So when the 3 legs are equally strong, what do you think will happen when you try to put anything on top of the stool? That stool would be able to carry quite a bit of weight. Anytime any of those legs are not the same, one is stronger or the other one is weaker than the other, you don't have a stable organization that is able to learn and to live. So those 3 legs or those 5 disciplines need to be built at equal capability. So I usually don't say systems thinking is more important or team learning is more important. Those 5 disciplines need to come together. A lot of times, perhaps some of us in the consulting field, we may specialize in 1 or 2 of these areas. But if your intention is to integrate the 5 disciplines, it's important that all 5 disciplines are equally strong. Okay, so the journey in the next few weeks is how do we go about understanding what these 5 disciplines are and how do we strengthen them? Okay. Indonesia, Huda, you're here? Huda, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Oh, all right.
boy.
So, oh my goodness. It looks like he's growing every day.
Yes.
All right.
Is it the first
so-
session or the second session, Sheila?
Well, we're just finishing up the first session, but it's the same,
Oh, all right.
same video link.
Right.
So you're not
Right.
late. But since you're here, it's good for you to quickly meet who are the others on the team. I'm sure you know Kwanan and Tom, so they have been on the first session. We also have Peter Sia from Singapore. I don't know whether you can see him. Right, he's there.
Yes, I think we met.
also have.
Hi, Peter.
Yes, good. And we also have Lisa. Lisa is based in Hong Kong. She's originally from China. So she's also joined the first session. Huda, by the way, is Indonesia. So I can see he's traveling. Are you about to get home or are you going somewhere?
I'm getting home. That was
Okay.
meeting, and yeah, in a few minutes we'll arrive.
Okay, wonderful. So at this point, if anybody wants to drop off, you're welcome to do so. Feel free to leave your questions directly with me on my WhatsApp. Peter, is Lisa on the WhatsApp group?
No, I've not added yet.
Okay, feel free to add her on so that she keep getting notices or she can continue to communicate with the others on the group.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So if
by the
anybody wants
way-
to drop off at this point, you're welcome to do so. And And then if not, I'm moving on to the second session, the second group, first session. Yes. Tuanan, you were saying?
So I'm about to leave. But I mean, like
Yes.
before I leave, it may transfer the already Huda is already the co-host for now, and also you will be transferred as a
Okay.
host. So you can
Oh,
take
okay. Wonderful.
David to record
Thank
for
you
the
so much.
to the
Yes,
cloud.
and Tuanan has been very gracious to offer the Zoom link so that all of us can be in this space together. So thank you very much for that. So I appreciate it.